All right, and we are doing our series on the blended family. I think we're just going to go back and forth instead of doing like two or three blended families and two or three Christ-centered marriages. I think next week we're going to do Christ-centered marriage. We're going to do something special next week. We are both going to talk about how you can become a Christian, how you can be saved, become a believer of Jesus, and how that affects your marriage. And so be ready next week. We're going to talk about how the first married couple, that's Adam and Eve, they got it wrong. Now Jesus got it right. But today, Lori is going to tell you what it's like being the biological mother in a blended family, in our blended family. So, Lori, go ahead and get us started.
Okay. Number one, you'll have to excuse my voice. I've been dealing with the cold for a few weeks. But what I did to prepare for this is I literally just kind of Googled challenges biological mothers have in blended families. And so four main areas popped up. So I just kind of went with that. So the first main area is new family dynamics and roles. So I just made some notes about some things that I have experienced in my blended family. You may have experienced the same things, you may not. Every situation is different. There's limitless number of blended family combinations,
67.
things to
Ron
deal
Deal.
with.
Ron Deal counted it out. 67 combinations. Wow.
So
We have the easiest.
ours is not as complicated as it could be. So the first thing I noted down is that being a single mom, going from being a single mom to back to having a dad in the home was an adjustment. So, I'm a teacher and I pretty much was on survival mode for a while. And so I was excited to have a dad in the house again, but it was an adjustment. And, I was used to kind of being the authority, and having Joey in the house again was a great relief. But I think I was pretty naive about it. I thought, we were going to get married and we would just kind of pick up where we left off, and he would be the dad, and things we would just kind of. And the boys, I think the boys accepted him pretty well, but it's kind of one of those things. Was I didn't know what I didn't know about that whole situation, and it was fine. Like I said, we didn't have any major issues with that, but we've learned since then, and I'll get into some resources later on this, but we've learned since then that the biological parent needs to be the disciplinarian at first, and then step parent needs to work on building relationships with their stepchildren. So, like I said, I think it went pretty well, but it might have gone better if we'd have focused on those things. But we didn't know.
Can I jump in there? You know
Yeah.
what I think? Talking about that makes me think they accepted me, but I don't think they had the idea that they were getting another dad. I think mama's got this new man in her life. That's gonna be cool. It's gonna be like our new buddy. I think and probably every kid that's part of a divorce where their mother and father break up, like when they see their mother with another man, like, all right, hey, I like this guy. He's gonna be our new buddy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably how they see. Don't you think
And
that's?
they didn't think he was an authority figure necessarily.
Yeah.
And so, we worked together as a team, and I think we've learned some things along this journey in the last couple of years, but so we know better now. Um, but it was a challenge at first, and this is a side note, but he was active duty when we got married, so then there was the constant transition of him being gone and then him being back and then him being gone and then him being back. So it's kind of like we had to like readjust over and over and over
Here I
again.
am, and there I go. Here I am, and there I go.
Yeah. And then the second thing I noted down was our different parenting styles. And Joey and I, he's more black and white, and I'm kind of more of a empathetic gray area type. And we got two or three boys have ADHD, and so that was kind of a challenge at first because I was more lenient. And like I said, I was on survival mode for a while as a single mom, so I probably let things go I shouldn't have just because I just didn't have it in me to do with. We were doing good just to get to bed every night, and get up and go to school in the morning, and just things like that. And so, when you go through a divorce, you want to protect your kids from further trauma. So sometimes you think, well, if I discipline for this or discipline for that, or if maybe I'm just nitpicking and I don't want to cause them more trauma, you know.
Do you
So
think? Do you think? Um, Before we got married, maybe even before we started dating, that you being a single mother, did you ever get to the point you're like, you know what? I guess this is the way it's going to be. I'm just going to be a single mother.
well,
I just got to deal with it, and I'm going to be the parent, and there's not going to be, another dad with me. So when the boys are with me, that's it.
well, I know for sure I was concerned about that, and I was reading a book. I don't even remember what it was called now, but it was talking about how boys who are raised by single mothers, do this and do that, and it was negative this and negative that, and I was so afraid of, the boys ending up in jail or on drugs or whatever, because I didn't have a father figure for them. So I don't know if I thought about it like that, but I did. I was afraid that, if I raise these boys by myself,
I mean, like,
they're not going to end up right.
I'm not, when I like, but I think what I'm thinking is, you think, well, I got the responsibility. It's all on me. Nobody's here to help me, so I just got to do the best I can. If a man comes along, that's great. But if a man doesn't come along, I'm the parent while the kids are here, so I just got to do the best I can.
Yeah.
You know.
And as for me, my parents passed away before I turned 30, so I literally was by myself. Other than my church was there, and they did a lot for me. But yeah, I was by myself, and my ex's parents helped me for a while too. But yeah, I did. That was a concern.
But let me give you one of them, our Hallmark movie moment. This is our Hallmark lifetime love movie moment. Whenever we got engaged, it wasn't like a month later they sent me to Kuwait.
Oh yeah.
The Air Force sent me to Kuwait for 6 months. And so I thought, you know what? We're getting married. I'm going to end up being responsible for them and paying their bills. So I said, here. You just take my ATM card, take my bank card, and take my checkbook, and you just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he
it was
did
kind of
that.
like I see that you were a single mother, and I see that you need help. So here you go. We're getting married soon, so I'm gonna go ahead and start helping you.
Yeah, he did that. And he said, here's my debit card, and here's my code, and you have X amount of dollars every month that you can spend on groceries or whatever you need it for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just made
I don't
sure I
need it.
stayed there.
I'm living off of the meals ready to eat.
All right. So the second thing that was a category was co-parenting with the ex. Man, I could go on about this for like
Be nice.
an hour.
Be nice. Nice.
I am.
Be nice. Be nice. Be nice.
I will say we went through stages. There was good times, there was bad times, good times and bad times. So it was up and down.
But now we're at the stage where it's all almost behind us.
Yeah, yeah.
None of that really matters now.
I will say that as an educator, I see the devastation and the trouble it causes children when their parents don't get along. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to have two parent conferences, one for the dad and one for the mom, because they just refuse to sit down and be civilized for 10 minutes together. And that's a shame. And I just told myself, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to be that mother that's angry and bitter and spiteful. And I'm just going to make things as hard as I possibly can just to get even, because that's not going to hurt my ex. That's going to hurt my kids. So that is one thing I just put my mind to right away, is I'm not going to be like that.
And tell you what, for the first 7, 8, 9 years, we had a pretty good relationship with the biological father, and we had him over the house, and we did things together, and he'd go to church with us sometimes. We'd all go to church together, and we were. I tell you what, a lot of people say, "Boy, y'all get along good." Why not? Why not?
We had a visitation schedule, and so just to kind of put it in perspective, when my ex and I got divorced, my oldest son was like 11. My middle one was like 4 or 5, and my youngest one was like 18 months, 2 years. I think when we got married, he was close to 3. But so they were little, and the youngest one, he didn't know what was going on. But
Mm.
the my ex ended up marrying the woman that he was, cheating on me with. I'll just say that much. And so that whole dynamic was a little weird, but he and we made sure we followed the joint custody arrangement, and if we needed to switch a weekend or something, most of the time we did that without too much fussing. Um, but like he said, now that 11-year-old is 25, and our middle one is 20 in college. Our first one has a wife and kids of his own, and he's the best daddy to his little girls.
Oh yeah, great.
The best daddy.
He's the boy. When you say, "Boy, I wish my kid would grow up to be a certain way," our oldest boy, that's him.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
And maybe I don't know if he learned what not to do from that, or what he learned to do from us. Oh, maybe a little bit of both. The middle one's 20 and in college, and youngest one is fixing to be 17. And so he's the one that Joey recently adopted. And so, the ex now has a new wife, younger wife, so they have a couple of kids together, and that's pretty much his life now. And so, like he was said earlier, that whole situation is null and void now. We don't do.
And the kids are old enough that they don't.
Yeah.
They're still sociable with their dad, but the whole visitation thing is long gone.
Yeah, it's just
They're
obsolete
past that
now.
stage.
Yeah, I mean, we made it work the best we could,
Mm.
but if, things weren't always easy. We didn't always agree on things, but I think comparing to others, I think it went pretty well
Do you
for us.
think sometimes you being the mother, the biological mother, do you think that the other spouses, like his wife and me, do you think sometimes when it came to visitation or going on trips or whatever, do you think there's a lot of pressure, say from the externals, like the the other spouses?
Pressure like how?
Um, like say, well, we're going on a trip, so we just got to make sure we change the arrangements, and well, that maybe causes conflict, maybe
Yeah.
good or bad. And that's the thing is and it puts her in the middle to where one side wants to do one thing, the other side wants to do other. Now she's got to juggle things.
Yeah. I mean, there were times where I think, planned a vacation or planned a Christmas something or whatever that we had to work around. Um, but I think for the most part, we made it work. And the next thing, and this is kind of one of the bigger things, in my opinion, is the emotional challenges that come with being a biological mom in a blended family. And, looking back now, the boys, I think, like Joey said earlier, they were okay with Joey, and maybe they, like he said, saw him more as a buddy. But I think they did struggle. They still love their biological father, and I struggled with that for a little while because I was, hurt, and I didn't want them to, oh, he's a terrible person and whatever. But he's still their dad, so I had to work through that and accept the fact that they still love their dad. They love their stepdad too, but they also love their dad. So that's something that they had to deal with. They had to go through, which something I didn't think about back then, but I know now that they had to go through a grieving process. They're grieving with the family that they knew, the life that they knew. Everything is different now. And, that's not something I addressed with them because I didn't know. This is something that,
She's going to talk about this in a minute, but this book right here, Preparing to Blend, if we had something like this, where it talks about, hey, look, y'all gonna get married. I'm marrying the mom of 3 boys, and I'm not gonna be the dad, and they're gonna still have a connection to their dad, a bond, a loving bond with their biological dad, and they're not just they may not ever think of me as the dad, and it may take a while for them to even want to even associate with me. So them give me the brush over, that's to be expected. And I didn't know these things. And I'm sure on the other side, their stepmom, they didn't know these things either. So I think coming in, I think we both probably thought they're going to love me, and they're going to think he's just like dad number 2. And it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's not like that.
and I think, I ignorantly thought we were just going to pick up where we left off and everything's going to be great. And even though, we had a good family, There were some things we probably could have dealt with better. And like he said, I felt caught in the middle sometimes because, I wanted them to love Joey, but also, had to accept that they still love their biological dad. And there was some kind of a disagreement, or if the boys were getting punished for something or whatever, sometimes I felt like I was caught in the middle. And I still do sometimes, even though, the boys are older. And it's hard to, you know, again, I know better now, but at the time, I was always like, well, if I side with him, the kids are going to be mad at me. If I side with the kids, he's going to be mad at me. There's no situation where I'm going to come out feeling good about it.
Do you know what? I'm gonna interject here. Mothers are a little more lenient than fathers and stepfathers, but there were times when I would get onto the boys or catch the boys messing up or not doing what they're supposed to do, and I get on top, and she didn't always see it. She wasn't at that situation. She wasn't there to see what was going wrong or not doing. They weren't doing right. So you know what I've done lately? I just step back. Let her see what's going on. Let her see what they're messing up or not doing right. And then she catches it and she corrects it. And I'm like, I should have done that a long time ago. I should step back. And you as a stepmom or stepdad, step back. Let the biological parent see what's going on. Let her see, because uh I mean, just reality, whether they mean to or not, the biological parent is more often going to side with her kids, and not necessarily that the stepdad or stepmom is wrong. It's just that, well, they want to be more lenient. They want to go to more towards the kid. So you might be like, well, I'm facing a losing battle. Sometimes just step back, and let the parent finally see what's going on.
Yeah, and I think there's got to be a level of trust there. You have to trust your spouse to know they're going to do the right thing. And as a biological mom, you want to protect that relationship with your kids, and so I think that kind of plays a role in it as well. um, and something I want to add to that is I've had people tell me, well, they're your biological kids, so whatever they need, they come first. Your spouse is going to come second. You got to take care of your kids. And then we last year and a half or so going to these marriage conferences that we talked about in our other videos, we learned that you have to protect your marriage first. And because if you don't protect your marriage, you're going to end up with another divorce, and then your kids go through more trauma, and you're not really helping them. So even if you're siding with them all the time, and your spouse is taking a back seat all the time, you're eventually going to damage your marriage, and then your kids, you're just going to end up in that cycle all over again. So
We've been to 2 marriage conferences in the past, um, 16 months and 14 months. The first when we came back, the first time, we told the 2 youngest boys, we set them down, say, hey, look, things gonna be different around here. Um, our marriage comes first, and you guys come second. They were like, okay, not really sure what that means, but okay.
they didn't quite see it like we did, but anyway, so that was something, just dealing with their emotional challenges. That was just something that I wish I'd have thought more about. I knew that they were dealing with that stuff, but I didn't have it quite verbalized to me like we've learned. And again, I got some books I'm going to share with you here in a minute that kind of helped us know what those things were. And so the other thing is just other challenges like child support. In the beginning, my ex had paid child support, and then for reasons I won't get into here, I told him I made it to where he didn't have to do that anymore, because I knew that with my salary and Joey's salary, we could take care of the boys, and so that was not an issue for me, after a time, because a lot of exes, biological parents struggle with the whole child support issue where you're supposed to be getting money from the ex, and sometimes they want to dictate what you can do with it. And we did a little bit of that back and forth. Or we would buy clothes, and the boys would go over to their house with the clothes we bought them. And I didn't really care if they, as long as they came back with something that was decent, it's fine, whatever. But if they came over to our house in something that they bought, and they were mad if they didn't come back over there with those same clothes, stuff like that. So that was an issue for a little bit, but that kind of worked itself out after a while.
But for the most part, with your ex and their stepmother and that whole group over there, we kind of got along pretty good, and our dealings were pretty good. And I think, listen, people, you may think, well, why in the world did you do away with child support? You shouldn't do that. Well, sometimes you got to give a little to get a little. When we said, okay, to her ex, you know what, forget the child support. It helped him because there were times when he was struggling, and
it was mainly for the kids.
Yeah,
because I knew if
it helped him whenever, and because we knew that if we're helping him, it's going to help them too. Mm-hmm. And it did help.
If he could have more money in his pocket, then he could afford better things for them.
Mm-hmm.
And
it did kind of equal itself out.
It did, yeah. And so, that was just something that, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to do that so the boys would have a better situation when they went over there. And then church is another, just other challenge. And in the beginning, they would go to church with us every other weekend because they were with Dad every other weekend. And then just like with everything else, that just kind of got to where it was obsolete. Now they go with us all the time.
Yeah.
And, but some families struggle with that. We taught Sunday school, 3rd grade and then 5th grade. And we would have kids that were only there every other weekend. Because they were doing the same situation. Mm-hmm. And so, that might be something that you're struggling with. The only advice I have for you is just do what you can to get along, and you want to keep the peace for the sake of your kids.
Right.
You don't have to be right all the time, unless it's, they're in danger or it's a safety issue. And that's kind of, I've had some of those things I had to deal with. So, there were things I put my foot down about, but for the most part, I just tried to make sure the kids were not seeing arguing and fighting and, things like that. So, before we get off here, I want to share some resources with you. And he already told you one. This is preparing to blend. Again, this is something we wish we'd have had.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put in the camera. There we
go.
Yep. So if you're a family that you're fixing to get married and you know that you're going to be in a blended family situation, we would highly recommend this book. This guy, Ron Deal, he works with Family Life. Family Life is a marriage conference we went to where we learned about him. And so that's one. And he's
the blended family director.
Yeah, he's the blended family guy.
Family Life Blended.
And then we've read this book recently, The Smart Step Family, which told us a whole lot about the things we should have done that we didn't do, but now we know. And this is the Smart Stepdad
That's the book I threw away before we got married. I was like, I don't need that. I know how to be a dad.
Yeah.
Never been a dad, but I know how to be a dad.
Yeah. And then he wished he'd read it.
Yeah, I wished I'd read it.
And then if you're a stepmom, there's a stepmom book, but I didn't need that. And this is what I really like. Yes, building love together in blended families. Gary Chapman wrote this. If you've ever heard of the 5 love languages, this is the guy that did that. So in this book, they have the 5 love languages, the little quiz in the back. And so we did that with our youngest son. And if we'd have had this book, years ago, we could have done it with them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are just some resources, and you can go get if you want to, just to kind of help you out. And this video is more of just here are some things that I've struggled with. And so, do you want to show him that board? He got this.
Yeah, I got something. I don't know how good this is going to look, but I drew something on a whiteboard. It's my scribble, so forgive me. And I'll try to explain this. So what I got here is, and I learned this from Ron Deal's books, and we got this house. So in the household, that's us. So we got me and Lori, then our 3 boys, then our oldest boy is number 1, K number 1. He has a wife and 2 grandbabies. And then over here, we have the biological father, and then his wife, which is the stepmom, and then they have their own 2 kids. And over here on the other side, we have my ex, which is she's not in the picture. It's not a negative or it's not a positive. She's just not part of this dynamic. So this external force has no relevance on us. But over here, you see to where this force over here, it's kind of off to the side, but it still interacts with this right here. We still had to do the custody and the different weekends and sharing responsibilities,
Holidays.
holidays, and all that stuff. So, and you're going to have some good times and bad times, and some struggles and some victories and some hard times and good times, and you just got to keep working on it. But and it really makes it tough when these relationships are strained. And then up at the top, you got your grandparents. So they have like three different sets of grandparents. Some may have it 2, 4, 6, 8 sets of grandparents.
Yeah,
And then you have
step family of step family of step
yeah,
family.
yeah. We don't have kids of our own, so if we did, we'd have another section over here. So we'd have our own kids and all dynamics. Now this dynamic is an easy one. In that book with Ron Deal said there's 67 different combinations like this, and I've seen some of it like they're like crazy. You can't read it because there's so many different variables. But anyway, this is just something. And look at this, and the blended family is a tough life, and it's not something that you say, you know what, I want to get married and divorced and get married again and divorced and married again, and I want to have 3 ex-wives and 3 sets of kids from all 3 wives and 6 sets of grandparents, and I want to marry somebody that's got 2 sets of kids and 2 sets of grandparents. Nobody thinks like that. But sometimes it happens.
That's much harder than staying with your spouse and working it out.
Yeah, it is much harder.
I mean, unless you're in an abusive situation or something extreme like that,
Yeah,
it's much better, biblical, and easier to just stick with your spouse and work things out. Because once you get into, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with just a multiple, just like he was showing you, just complicated issues and dynamics, and it can get really, really hairy.
But I actually took a course through Family Life Blended that Rondell put on. It was the Blended Family Ministries course, and it was an extensive course, and I got a certificate and whatever. Now, hey, all right, but they were talking about how churches have a hard time dealing with families that are divorced, and we had one of the preachers that was in that panel, and that sorry about that.
I think our cat
Technical difficulties.
got a hold of the camera.
Technical difficulties there. But anyways, when I was doing that training, one of the pastors in that group decided to break down divorce and remarriage, and basically, look, you don't want to get divorced. We don't want to get divorced. Nobody comes into marriage saying, let's. And if I don't like this, well, I'll just get. Well, some people do, but you shouldn't. And we both agonized. I agonized over my marriage, and she agonized over hers, and we just, in the end, we couldn't reconcile it. And the part of the training I learned was that sometimes in those situations, you can't reconcile your marriage, and you go past you seek forgiveness for that, and you get forgiveness, you get forgiven for the situation you had yourself in, the divorce. And then once you feel that God's forgiven for you for that, you get married again, and God's going to recognize that remarriage as a real marriage. So you just got to say, this is a real marriage. When I married her after our divorces, it was a real marriage, and God has blessed our marriage. And we truly believe that our marriage has been blessed by God, and this is a covenant. And so, and that's a starting point. And then you can start your family and your parenting and your marriage and everything with that assumption, with that knowledge that your remarriage is a covenant made by God, and God's blessed that marriage. Oh, so you got anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So thank you for watching this video, and please give us a thumbs up. And if you have not, subscribe. And if you have any questions, please give us some questions and comments. We'd like to hear what you got to say. If you got any biological mother or biological father,
or just other topics that you want us to talk
situations,
about.
Next week we're going to talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news, the evangelion, from Genesis chapter 3. I took a challenge. I challenged myself. I can teach the gospel from Genesis chapter 3. So next week we're going to teach the gospel from Genesis chapter 3, where the first married couple got it wrong. Jesus got it right. So thank you, and God bless.